Well, this past week, Attorney General Dustin McDaniel admitted to an inappropriate relationship with Hot Springs attorney Andy Davis. The allegation came from a domestic dispute case in Garland County where Davis's ex-husband made the accusation. Since McDaniel's admission, it was revealed that his office had handled 5 cases in which Davis was an opposing attorney. McDaniel said he had no dealings in those cases, but he did use protection in the state's FOI law from revealing any documentation, emails, or phone records involving his office. Now, the political fallout is what we now calculate. Joining me to talk politics is Michael Cook with Cook's Outlook and Jason Tolbert of the Tolbert Report, 2 political blogs you can find on our website at talkbusiness.net. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Particularly during the holiday week.
Sure.
Where to begin? Let's talk about the way this whole scandal kind of erupted and how it has played out this week. First off, McDaniel issues a statement confirming that this relationship took place. Kind of what was the immediate reaction that you guys got from some of the politicos and observers that you talked to?
Well, the immediate reaction, it sort of confirmed a rumor that people have been hearing for some time. People hadn't put a lot of credence in the rumor because they weren't sure if it was true or not. But once he admitted that, then people started looking a lot more closely at who is this lady, what was going on there. And really, McDaniel's statement left a lot of unanswered questions. So people really started wondering, what's going on here?
Some of those questions were, what is a limited interaction?
Right.
What was the extent of the inappropriate part of the relationship? What were you hearing initially?
Initially, the first emotion I heard from Democrats was just disappointment. Disappointment in what he had done and the whole affair in more ways than one. And then it's kind of slowly turning to a little bit of anger as the story has progressed. Anger and disappointment because he had everything lined up just right in terms of raising money, seemingly on the march to the nomination, maybe even the governor's mansion, and then now to completely blow himself up made a lot of his supporters and potential supporters just disappointed and angry and wanting more questions answered.
Is there any kind of inclination in what we've seen in some of McDaniel's early governor's campaign strategy, getting out there and raising money early, floating the trial balloon, I guess earlier, about 2 weeks ago, that he was the front runner for the nomination, but he would maybe struggle against Asa Hutchinson. Does some of that do we see now how some of that was used strategically?
Yeah. Inadvertently, though, I think he has set himself up for failure in this regard. First, of course, the affair is a failure, but he released a poll where he showed against 2 potential Democratic primary opponents, John Burkhalter and Bill Halter. His own internal poll showed him with 54% of the vote against these 2 other potential candidates. One, I never believed that was that high. The problem for McDaniel now is eventually somebody's going to do a poll of the primary and release it, and he'll be at 35, 38, and the story will be McDaniel dropping like a rock, losing 15, 18, 20 points. So now he has other political problems to face as the race for the Democratic primary unfolds, whoever the other candidates are.
All right, Jason?
No, I think he's right. And I think you see almost some premeditation in some of those things that he did. The raising the money early, the putting out that poll right before this news broke. He knew this news was eventually going to come out.
No doubt.
And people don't really have an appetite for when people try to handle this type of thing from a political strategic point of view. He did make the admission, he did admit it, but he admitted it sort of in his own way after he already had over $1 million in the bank. I know some of his donors have to be upset. I'm sure they didn't know this news when they wrote those checks to him.
Well, I talked to somebody who had literally has a check written and was going to send it in, and then they decided, literally, I'm going to hold off and find out how this shakes out. Of course, it's just one person, doesn't mean it's the whole state, but it is indicative of he has a lot of problems and a lot of repair work to do. But this story, unfortunately, is going to continue, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Well, and let's talk about just kind of how the scandal played out the rest of the week. Right. Some of it because of the way McDaniel's office responded to the media requests for more information. Really what I think became a big issue in the day 2 part of this story was that this relationship between the lawyer and his office, even though I don't think they had any direct connection with each other, there is the appearance of impropriety there and a lack of knowledge.
Right.
Jason?
Sure, there's a lot of layers here that you have to work through, and that's the bad thing about a story like this from McDaniel, is every layer creates a new story and a new press cycle. So it's not just one kind of shocking story. it continues to drip out as we peel this thing back. And you're right, there's the layer of, was there any ethical problems between an attorney having a relationship with the opposing counsel? Did that cause any problems? And even if there weren't any problems, the question at least gets asked and gets discussed. And then there's the other layer as to some of the circumstances surrounding Andy Davis. And so when you start looking at all these different things, there may be another layer that we find about next week that we don't know about now. And so the story just feeds itself and just continues to come out one story at a time.
Mm-hmm. Death by a thousand cuts,
I think, and I wrote an article about this today on cooksoutlook.com, McDaniel's team, I think, miscalculated this whole situation. I think they assumed we'll put out the statement, we'll be apologetic, and then that will be the end of it. But then, as Jason was alluding to, there are more layers. There's the involvement of Andy Davis as an attorney with the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office claims that there's been no conflict of interest, everything's fine, but we've not yet heard from the Attorney General. He's not told Arkansas that. We've only heard spokesperson.
Well, there's been no documentation of that either, because they're using the FOI shield to not have to release documentation.
That's a great point. In today's Democrat Gazette, there's a front page article about how, well, legally the Attorney General has the right to deny access to documents using FOI. Politically, it looks like, and I hate to use this word because I don't believe it's the case, but it looks like to the average voter that it's part of a cover-up. That what are they hiding? It's never the crime, it's always the cover-up. So McDaniel, I think, has made miscalculations in terms of not coming out right away with a press conference, apologizing, answering all the questions right away, and now he's withholding documents. And I would bet money there's probably nothing in these documents. It's probably just legal stuff that's all on the up and up. But because by refusing to release them, now it creates, okay, what is he hiding?
So why would they not release them?
Well, and the problem is the court of public opinion now, the presumption is on Dustin McDaniel to prove there was nothing wrong going on. Obviously, he was not telling the state the truth about the affair he was having. We know that. And so once you're not telling the truth about one thing, people will begin to assume you're not telling the truth about the other things. And so in a normal circumstance where he could just say, look, there's nothing there, nothing's going on, he now has to prove that to people, and that gets difficult to do. And so when you don't release records, when you're not just as transparent as you can be, people are going to assume you're hiding something. The FOIA law, certainly the way it's written, the Attorney General can use that as a protection, but he's not required to not release those things. He can release those things and redact portions of it if he needs to. And I think that would probably be a good first step. I mean, he's already got himself in a situation now where people are questioning this heavily. So I don't know how he does damage control to get out of this situation now, just because of the way he's handled it the past week.
Jason's on something. This could have been a very cut and dry case where the elected official says, I made a mistake, I had a personal indiscretion, and then, I apologize, and then we move on. But all these other things are now coming into play. There's the person he had the affair with. I mean, I wrote today, when they have a phrase, McDaniel's mistress was led away in handcuffs after a murdered man was found in her driveway, you've got some political problems on your hands.
Right.
So these are things that McDaniel, and it's getting to the point where it's almost too late to fix the damage. As crazy as it sounds, it's still 2012. We're not even in 2013. But the way he has mishandled the telling of the story and getting all the facts out, this is getting worse and worse by the day.
So what does he do politically and from a strategic standpoint? You're a political consultant. You've been around politics plenty of times. We've all seen a lot of these things happen. So, Michael, how do you handle that?
I think now, look, it's Christmas. Tuesday is Christmas. We're all buying presents and busy. I think right after Christmas, he needs to come out, either do a press conference or something, but talk directly to the press and answer every question exhaustively, every little detail, whatever it is, what you should have done in the first place. Otherwise, this thing is going to continue. I would release the FOI documents. There's probably nothing there, so go ahead and say, look, I want to be transparent. I don't have to legally do it, but look, there's nothing here, so feel free to look through it, and then get past it, and then, frankly, go on an apology tour of the state. Because let's not forget, to be governor, he still has to get the Democratic nomination. And there are people in the Democratic Party who are important people who are not happy because they've invested so much time and money, and then now to have this continue to bubble up and explode on him, he's got some problems he needs to fix.
So is this Michael's wishful thinking, or is this good strategic political advice?
Well, the problem for McDaniel is not a lot of people really know the Attorney General. This might be the first introduction some people are having to him in a major way. And so what he has to do is change the image people have of him. People, when they think of Dustin McDaniel, right now at least, this scandal, or whatever you want to call it, this story that's happened last week, is the first thing they're going to think of. He's got to find a way to change that image. The other problem he's had is that people haven't seen him on television talking about this, apologizing for this. They've only read about it, and so they've been able to form their own story in their own mind about what's going on, which is probably maybe more scandalous than reality.
Right. Well, Jason's on something there. If he had gone on TV to begin with, the story would have been, "I'm sorry, I hurt my family," and which he said in his statement, but he's not said that publicly. Now he has to do both. Now he has to not only do that and apologize for his indiscretion, but now he also has to explain how there was no ethical problems and everything was on the up and up. So now he has to do two things when he should have just done one. So he's created a bigger problem for himself than it should have been.
So we've got other political candidates who could capitalize on this, but there's not a lot of strong candidates out there. Mike Ross, who would have been one of the stronger candidates to challenge Dustin McDaniel, had already ruled out a governor's run. He says again this late in the week, "I'm still not going to be a candidate for governor. I've been approached, but I'm not going to do it." You've got Asa Hutchinson is probably the front runner on the Republican side at this point in time. I guess, Jason, do you still consider Dustin McDaniel the front runner for the Democratic nomination?
I would still say he's the front runner, but he's a much weaker front runner than he's ever been. He should be very thankful that Mike Ross has already made the decision he's going to go into the private sector. If that decision hadn't been made, I think he would be in major trouble. There are still some other strong candidates that are looking at opposing him that will give him definitely a run for his money. If he decides to stay in it, that could be the best case scenario for Republicans, because if he stays in it with the money that he's raised, with the name recognition he already has, he could very well survive the primary and enter the general election perhaps the weakest candidate Democrats could field to run against the Republican. So that may be a gift the Democrats could give to the Republican Party if they're looking to give them a Christmas present, is to make Dustin McDaniel the nominee.
Yeah, a couple things. Yes, he's still the front runner, but a very weak front runner at this moment. Of course, he's the only officially announced candidate for governor, so of course it's easy to be the front runner when there's nobody else out there. There's other two potential candidates that have floated their name out there. Little Rock businessman John Burkhalter, who people are saying that he would probably put a lot of his own money in, which would make him a player. And then former Lieutenant Governor Bill Halter, who ran for the U.S. Senate unsuccessfully in 2010, but still has name recognition. So both of those are credible candidates. But there's not a lot of excitement right now around their candidacies. Not that could change. And there's certainly a possibility somebody else may enter, somebody who's a credible candidate, not well known maybe statewide, but who could build a base. But the problem for Democrats right now is, as we sit here today, with McDaniel as the nominee, we have problems because he's mishandled this whole situation. So unless he fixes the problem in the next week or so, then Democrats may need to say, is this the person we need at leading our ticket in 2014? I mean, it's that tight of a window where he's got to fix this quickly.
And the ramifications are much bigger than just the governor's mansion. I mean, you're looking at Democrats trying to retake the House coming up. It's just a 58 or 51-48 split there in the House. This could feed down to those other races that normally campaign with the governor candidate. They were able to campaign with Mike Beebe very effectively in the last election cycle. If McDaniel's at the top of the ticket, this could really damage them as well. So Democrats have to think not only about the governor's race, but really the ticket as a whole.
And Asa Hutchinson comes into the picture late in the week as well with an announcement with the National Rifle Association that he is going to kind of head up. We're going to talk about it in a future block here in a second. Basically a school security initiative with the NRA. It's not a bad idea, is it, Michael, to be pro-gun in the state of Arkansas and in a way, or do you see this as dangerous territory for him?
All Arkansas politicians who run for statewide office are pro-gun, Democratic or Republican. So there's you could try to outgun each other, no pun intended, but at a certain point I think it becomes a wash, because if McDaniel is the Attorney General, is the gubernatorial candidate, he's still pro-gun. So I think that point's a wash. I think the bigger point is, it's interesting is that we're having struggles on the Democratic side now with McDaniel's admission, but if Asa Hutchinson is the best they can do as a candidate, as a nominee. He's run 3 times for statewide office and lost. He ran for, just most recently in 2006, ran for governor against Mike Beebe and got crushed. I mean, absolutely crushed. And so if the Republican Party is supposed to be this new emerging, strong two-party, and the best they can come up with is a retread from Ghost of Christmas Past, the Republican Party's got some problems.
What do you think, Jason?
Well, back to the NRA press conference first. I think the contrast this week, if it does end up being Asa versus McDaniel, the contrast we saw this week, being at a press conference on CNN with the NRA talking about school safety versus the problems McDaniels have to deal with, that's an easy win for Asa right there. As far as the press cycle this week, Asa wins that one hands down. As for whether he's the nominee, I think a lot of people are watching Congressman Womack. I think whenever he makes whatever decision he's going to make to stay put, to run for governor, to run for Senate, a lot of dominoes are going to fall into place there. I make the case that he will consider the governor's race based on his background as a mayor there in Rogers and his executive experience. I know he's also looking at Senate as well. So I think that domino will be kind of the final one that makes the moving parts.
All right, I got to wrap this up here because we're running out of time.
Sure.
But anyhow, we got Jason Tolbert, Michael Cook. Glad to have both of you with us. Merry Christmas to both of you.
Thank you.
You can catch all of their opinions and commentary on our website at talkbusiness.net. Now, the Newtown shootings are